There's nothing market driven about this. So you aren't going to make money on the real estate. So that's not the objective. The objective is to put this real estate back into a productive use and in a productive way that's going to benefit the community and meet community needs. And that's what we're trying to do at Northside and what we're trying to do at South City.
Welcome to Pathbreakers, a podcast from the Kresge Foundation.
On each episode, we explore who has the power to shape a city. We're talking with change makers and city leaders who are tackling big problems in unexpected ways.
We'll learn more about the path-breaking work that they do, get into the nitty-gritty of how they get it done, and get some lessons from their playbook that you can implement in your own city. Hi, I'm Tracey Pearson, and I work on the communications team at the Kresge Foundation.
And I'm Tracey's co-host, Jamie Bennett, and I work at the intersection of arts, culture, and equitable community development.
This is episode 3 of our Memphis City series. And in Memphis, we are really looking at what it takes to create a city where families can thrive for generations. And speaking of families and generations, we are about to welcome not one, but 2 guests, Archie Willis and Alex Willis Boddie, business partners, also father and daughter.
Archie Willis is the founder and president of Community Capital, now called ComCap Partners, a Memphis-based real estate development and public finance firm. And Alex Willis Boddie is vice president of development and ComCap's project liaison for their community development portfolio. And she leads really ambitious adaptive reuse building projects.
That's right. Our central question this season is, who has the power to shape what happens in a city? And with Archie and Alex, we get to think about this through the lens of real estate. Specifically, who gets to decide what gets built, for who, and where it is.
And all too often, it's money that drives those decisions. ComCap and its nonprofit partners like Urban Renaissance Partners do it differently. They start with the community and what the community needs to thrive, and they still manage to make it work financially. I can't wait to get into this.
So let's welcome Archie Willis and Alex Willis Boddie.
Woo!
Welcome.
Thank you
to
so
the
much,
show.
Alex and Archie. It is great to have you with us. Just to get folks oriented, where are each of you sitting? What room are you in? What building are you in? What neighborhood are you in?
We are in Midtown Memphis, which is where our office is. I'm in my office. Alex is in her office. We're literally right down the hall from each other. But, we're in separate places, but in the same place.
Beautiful.
Awesome. Now, y'all are some real Memphians. Do you all call yourself Memphians? What do folks from Memphis call themselves?
Memphians.
Memphians, all right. So much so that there is a street named after you, your family. But I want for you both to describe Memphis and like your own experience with Memphis. Take us there.
Well, I'll start. So Memphis is a city that has its rich history. Obviously, most people know about our music legacy. And also, it goes beyond just music. I think we're known for just being a great cultural community where creative folks have an opportunity to display their creativity. And oftentimes, that does work its way into the area of community development. We also have our challenges economically and racially. Given our population, we are still, for the most part, although we're much more diverse than we used to be, we're still seen as a city of black and white. And unfortunately, from an economic perspective, most of the wealth is in the white community and the lack of wealth is in the black community. So a lot of our challenges that we have to face end up being along racial lines. And frankly, many of them are really economical or social economic, but the racial conversation oftentimes drives a lot of the decision-making process.
I would echo, obviously, everything he said. And I think Memphis is also a place where people have so much pride in our city. And when you talk to people from Memphis, particularly people who grew up in Memphis, although we're also our biggest critics in many cases, we don't want anyone else to talk bad about Memphis.
Right.
Only Memphians can talk bad about Memphis. And the way that people talk about our city, it's very based on like where you went to school or when you grew up and like who are your people, where are you from, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about some of the projects we've done because they are in different communities, and you have to really appreciate those communities when doing this work because people care so much about their city and their where they grew up and have so much pride in those areas. And obviously, you know, people love their cities and lots of other cities too, but I think ours is really more of a badge of honor because we also get talked negatively about so
Yeah.
much that we want to stand up and represent and say, this is what we're about, and you have to be here to understand it and appreciate what's going on in Memphis.
Love that. I sit in Detroit. I'm from Detroit too, so I can appreciate the where'd you grow up, what high school did you go to, because that's often, even up north, a question that we ask, and we're going to associate, oh, you went to this high school? I get a
Right.
sense of what neighborhood you sort of kind of grew up in. So I love that. Now, before we get too deep into the conversation, I want to set some context, specifically sort of the nuts and bolts of what you all do. For people who do not work in finance or real estate, we want to lay out just a little bit of background. So you all develop real estate in historically Black Memphis neighborhoods. And in some instances, these neighborhoods have fallen victim to just flat out disinvestment. And because of that history and context, some conventional real estate developers would say that they can't work there. From anything to like market rate rents, not being able to cover development costs, is sort of a myriad of things. But together, that has meant that there is now a gap in what communities need and what the capital markets will fund. So do you all want to speak to that a little bit? Just giving some background on what it's like to work in the market in Memphis.
Well, what you described is 100% accurate. The neighborhoods we work in have very little, if any, traditional market forces. And I actually came from a background where we dealt with both community development and market rate development. So I understand market rate forces. So I can have a conversation with people that do market rate deals about market rate. I understand that. But what they don't understand and what we have to figure out is how to create development opportunities, improve communities without the benefit of those market rate forces. So your traditional investors, your traditional lenders, they frankly just aren't necessarily suited to invest in projects that we're involved with, and some of it you can trace back to even redlining back back in the day, where neighborhoods that we work in were all redlined and were deemed to be not appropriate or good investments, or actually we'll call bad investments. So that still lingers and has some ongoing impact on what we do. But then a lot of it's just kind of the mentality and mindset. If you go to school and work for a large development firm, you learn market forces. So that's what you know. So when you have to deal with something that's not in that bandwidth, so to speak, you really don't know how to deal with it. You don't know how to pivot. You don't know how to make it work. So we just have to be super creative and relying on different sources of funding, and frankly a lot of persistence to get things done in order to make projects come to reality in the neighborhoods that we work in for the most part.
That's great. And Archie, I love when people talk about sort of getting creative with their finances. For me, towards the end of the month, that usually means transferring from savings into checking, just in case. But I think you all are doing something a little more complicated. And Alex, I want you to help folks that maybe aren't experienced in this understand a little bit about how the money works in this setting, right? So for those of us who aren't real estate developers like you all, the real estate transaction we're most familiar with is buying a house. And when I'm buying a house, I got some money in the bank. I need to take out a loan from the bank, get a mortgage, and that sort of lets me buy a house. But your projects are way bigger, way more complicated. It's not just money in the bank and a mortgage, especially because you're trying to develop affordable real estate, just as Archie was saying, that's not necessarily going to get repaid by market forces. So I think you real estate developers like talking about capital stacks and how do you stack up different kinds of money and tax credits and subsidies in order to make a project pencil out, in order to make it pay back. So can I sort of lean on you to give me a little bit of an MBA 101 and just walk us through what kinds of money, what kinds of subsidy, what does it take to get a project like the ones that you all do to happen?
Right. So, as you described with a traditional mortgage, you would have some equity that you brought to the table, and then you would go to the bank to provide you with a loan to cover the rest of the cost of purchasing that house. So, if you kind of build on that example or that analogy with the types of projects that we're working on, you're first of all, you're starting out with limited equity because these are, multi-million, and in some cases tens of millions of dollars of projects. So you're already starting off with a smaller pot to start with to begin with. And then when you go to the bank, of course, they're looking at you who doesn't have, tens of millions of dollars to invest in this project. And then they're also looking at what you think you're going to get as a return on that project. And they're like, well, we don't quite think we're going to give you the amount that you need to finish this deal because it's not going to work out for us. So then you have a gap or a shortfall. And the question is, how do you fill that gap? So there's two things that we do. And the first thing is, how do you increase your equity? So we increase our equity by using tools like low income housing tax credits and new market tax credits, depending on the project, so that a financial institution can then invest in a project through an incentive that makes it a good investment for them. And that increases your equity. So now you have a bigger equity pot. Of course, then you likely are still going to need some level of debt because you're going to still need some additional financing. But what we're finding now in our market in particular is equity plus that debt is still leaving a pretty big gap. And it's in Memphis largely because the economics of our market are not allowing us to charge the level of rent that we need to charge in these neighborhoods that would cover that gap. Also, the cost of everything has increased, as we all know. So while you were able to, once upon a time, finance a deal maybe with equity in a conventional bank loan and maybe a little bit of subsidy, that amount of subsidy has increased dramatically. So what we do then is talk to partners like Kresge, other philanthropic partners, and then also our public agencies, our Division of Housing Community Development, our Housing Authority, or federal funds, whoever has a opportunity that matches the project we're working on, and use those to layer that in with our whatever level of equity we get, whatever level of debt we can take on, and then as many subsidy products as we can add to it to make it all work together. And so in some cases, we have one project where that was 6 financial partners, money from the federal government, money from the city, and money from the state. So it just all gets layered in, and you just try to make it all fit together as best you can to make your project happen.
Talking a lot about money, which I think is apropos because Archie, before you were in real estate, you worked in finance. And something distinct I think about ComCap is your founding premise that it's really important and necessary to have minority representation in industry that serves mostly minority communities. Absolutely. Could you tell us about the magic of that formula and why you all are holding that up as a tenet within your organization?
Sure. So let me make one correction. So actually, I started out in real estate, working with my dad, and he actually had a mortgage company that was the first minority-owned Freddie Mac Fannie Mae seller servicer in the South. So I cut my teeth working with him. So my dad passed away. I was 29. So I worked with him when I finished graduate school until he passed, and our company essentially died with him. We had not done any kind of planning, succession planning, that kind of thing. That was not something that we were, totally familiar with. I mean, this is, something that was not typical in Black communities. So anyway, that's when I went to work for an investment banking firm and got my background in public finance. So while I was there, and I had a great time, good experience, it occurred to me that I really need to take these skills that I'm learning, the contacts and connections I've made doing investment banking or bond deals, and go back to the community. So that's when I created ComCap Partners or Community Capital and started working. And what I noticed there, to answer your question, is we were doing at the investment banking firm affordable housing deals, but they were being done typically by national investors who were strictly trying to get a return on investment. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the reality is when you go into neighborhoods like the neighborhoods we work in, you really need to do a little bit more in terms of trying to connect with the community and have the community be a part of what you're trying to create from a development standpoint. So it just led me to realize that we need to go back into the community, connect with the community, understand what their needs are, and take advantage of the resources that we could garner, take advantage of the experience I had gained in the public finance world, and see how we can make a difference in low-income neighborhoods that I grew up, like the neighborhood I grew up in, and the neighborhoods that are in Memphis.
What neighborhood were you growing up in, Archie? Just want you shout out real quick.
South Memphis.
All right, South Memphis.
South
Shout
Memphis.
out.
So, Archie, I'd like to stick with South Memphis for a second. And one of the places that you all have done some really amazing work is in South City. And you've taken over $200 million to transform a public housing site into a mixed income housing development with hubs for neighborhood services, including a sort of newly opening Porterleaf Early Childhood Academy. So can you just take a minute and just sort of paint a picture of South City, paint a picture of that development? What is it that's so absolutely wonderful about it that y'all are proud of?
So South City is a part of South Memphis. And actually, South City is, frankly, a made-up community. It's in South Memphis. It was made up from the standpoint of we got a Choice Neighborhoods grant from the federal government, from HUD. And as a part of that process, you have to label or brand your development. So we came up with the name South City. South Memphis was at one time a separately incorporated city. So when we start talking about South City, it made sense. But to your question, so this neighborhood is due south of downtown Memphis. In fact, you can walk from South City to downtown Memphis. And we had two large-scale public housing sites that were there, and both of them were slated to be redeveloped. So we have transformed both public housing sites into over 1,000 units of mixed income housing that was done between 2005 and, in fact, the last phase of the South City development, it's called Foot Park in South City, was just completed last year. So we had this, great array of new housing opportunities, senior housing developments on both sites. And then the South City Early Childhood Education Center that you referenced is part of one of the most historical Black schools in the city. That was one of the first junior high schools built for Black students back in the day. So the school system closed the school in 2016 due to very low enrollment, which has happened in a lot of inner city neighborhood communities in our city. And it just sat there vacant. And interestingly enough, in South City itself, there were 3 vacant schools. All 3 schools had been closed. So we had these 3 large structures in the middle of the South City community. And as a part of the Choice Neighborhoods Initiative, we were just trying to figure out how could we bring them back. Number one, they were blights in the community. And number 2, they were assets that needed to be reactivated. So we ended up focusing on the Porter Junior High School, and we just completed in March it's about a $11 million project. And it's the first phase of the whole school. We only took up about a fourth of the square footage. And Porterleaf started operating their early childhood education center in March. And for your listeners, Porterleaf is the largest early childhood education provider in Shelby County. So they are a significant player in terms of trying to get these kids ready for kindergarten and then beyond in their academic career. So it's really a vibrant part of the city. We still are surrounded by more than our fair share of blight that needs to be addressed. The social economics of the neighborhood has improved somewhat. Our employment rates have gone up, but we still have a lot of unemployed or underemployed people in the neighborhood. So a lot of work still to be done, but we're beginning to make an impact in the neighborhood and trying to expand beyond what we have defined as South City into the broader South Memphis community.
Now, Alex, I don't want to let folks think that you all are only working on the south side of Memphis. You've got some things happening in North Memphis as well. Is that right?
That is correct. So we also are working on the adaptive reuse of another vacant school in North Memphis. It's Northside High School is the name of the school, and it was vacant for about 4 or 5 years before we ended up purchasing it and working on a redevelopment plan. But it's a huge building, and it sits on a property that also houses a library, a community center, and another elementary school. And an aquatic center. So this obviously the high school is the largest property on this tract of land, and so for it to just be an inactive structure, and it's in the middle of this neighborhood, was not a positive thing for the neighborhood because it just sucked life out of that part of the neighborhood. So we were brought on board because there had been lots of conversations about what to do with this school by various parties, and we were brought on board to kind of figure out how to come up with a financing plan and a development plan for it. It's under construction now. We actually finished the core and shell of the building. It's been an $80 million project. So it was quite a significant investment in this neighborhood. And we have a residential component as well as a commercial component. So the residential units are completed. We're actually working on leasing those, and we're working with a nonprofit partner. So we were the primary development lead, and the nonprofit partner will ultimately own and operate the building with, obviously, professional property manager, all that stuff. And so they're working on the lease up right now, and we're really excited that part is completed. And our tenants are currently building out their spaces. So we're kind of going in round. So the first round of tenants just finished their spaces. So it's been a journey, and we've been working on this for 5 years, 6 years. And we're still not done. So
that means you all got started during COVID then.
We got started during COVID. Yes. We didn't think it would take quite this long, but that's part of what happens in this work. We've been doing it for a long time.
Yeah.
Alex, one of the things that really strikes me as interesting and different about the way you all are working is you seem to start with the folks that are already living in a neighborhood. So many real estate developers I talk with, so many planners, too many mayors, frankly, talk to me about people who one day might want to move somewhere. But you all start with the people that are already there. And in order to do that, you need them to trust you, right? You need them to sort of trust that you see them, you hear them. When they say, we want that to be a school again, you acknowledge that, even if you say, it can't necessarily be a school again. How do you build that trust as real estate developers? How do you work with community members? How does that happen?
Yeah, and I'll speak to this, but Archie's had way more experience with this than I have, so I'll let him.
We'll come to him next. I promise.
But, so I think our firm's very small, so our ability to reach masses of people is not great because there's only 5 of us, but we often partner with the people who are already in the neighborhoods. So in the cases of South Memphis or South City, there was a local CDC who we work very closely with, and we make sure we invite her to a lot of stuff, and she invites us to things. We present at her meetings so that people at least know that we're sincere and that we're there. We're not in our offices just coming up with plans. We come into their neighborhoods all the time. We host meetings in their neighborhoods. So that it's accessible to them. And of course, they're still going to be skeptical, and that's what Archie can speak way more to, actually dealing with the skeptics on a more one-on-one basis. But nonetheless, we try to be as transparent and as present as possible. And I think that's really where you get the credibility. I mean, obviously, you can try to talk to people and make them understand, but I think the relationships that you have and the people that you meet and work with who are actually doing the work that complements the work you want to do are the true key to making it all come together.
Well, and Archie, I'd love to get you to weigh in on this too. And I want to even invite you to open up the aperture of the question a little bigger, because not only have you been working with residents for a long time, but your father was doing that as well. Your father, who's got this street named after him. So talk a little bit about that sort of generational legacy of working with the residents, hearing their needs, dealing with the skeptics.
So a lot of it, as Alex alluded to, does go back to a generational connection. So I have the benefit of being a legacy person, however you want to say that. So it's not like I'm just some new kid on the block. So people know my name. They know the Willis name. The Willises have been around a long time and doing good work in the city. My dad was actually a civil rights attorney before he got into business. So he was involved in literally all of the landmark civil rights decisions that were made in the city, many of which had national implications. So this was back in the 50s and 60s. And in fact, he was a partner in the first integrated law firm in the city of Memphis back in, I forgot what year. So anyway, I say that to say I start off with a lot of credibility just because of my family's legacy. But what I also have learned is you really, and Alex really hit on this, is you really got to connect with the people. One lesson I learned, gosh, a long time ago, we were doing a project in a Black neighborhood, and we were proposing a townhouse development. And the residents saw townhouses as being something less than the single family house with a white picket fence.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
And they literally ran us out the meeting. Like, y'all need to get out of here. We're not having this. And so I talked to my dad afterwards. He just said, that's the experience. When they talk about and what we were proposing was way better than where they were living. Let me be clear about that. But as he said, when you talk about what they're striving to be, what we presented was not what they saw as where they're trying to go. So I was in my early 20s when I went to that meeting. So it taught me a lesson that you really got to go talk to people, understand where they are, and meet them where they are, and understand what their dreams and goals and aspirations are, as opposed to saying, this is a good idea, you need to adjust this. So having learned that lesson at a very, very early age in my career kind of set the foundation for knowing that this is how you got to conduct business, particularly when you want to impact neighborhoods that are Black neighborhoods that you're involved with or want to be involved with. So, lesson learned early on, and we just built upon that going forward. And one thing I do want to mention, so these bigger projects that we're involved with, we're typically not a part of the equity ownership structure. So we're providing a service. We have the expertise, the connections to put the deal together, to get it executed. And then we typically will have nonprofit partners. You mentioned early on, Jamie, Urban Renaissance Partners as being one of our nonprofit partners. So those entities ultimately will oftentimes own these large projects because, as I said earlier, there's nothing market driven about this. So you aren't going to make money on the real estate. So that's not the objective. The objective is to put this real estate back into a productive use and in a productive way that's going to benefit the community and meet community needs. And that's what we're trying to do at Northside and what we're trying to do at South City.
Alex, I want to ask you, what does it mean to be working with your dad, knowing that he started working with his dad? And it's just a beautiful legacy that y'all got going. And I love that for y'all. And I love that this is just steeped in history and richness. And you all are in a field that isn't dominated by people that look like y'all, but y'all are doing some amazing things. So I just really want to know what that's like for you to be walking in the legacy and carrying it forward at the same time.
Yes, and my brother works with us as well. So we're very privileged to be able to all work together. It's a unique position to be in, but it's honestly just been an unexpected just privilege and delight to be able to do this work together, because it's so meaningful. Just the work by itself, even if we weren't doing each other by itself, is so fulfilling and so meaningful, which it really truly has to be, because you have to be rewarded somehow. And it's really, really challenging and difficult work. So to be able to do that meaningful work with someone who obviously you admire, but also, is your dad, is just special. And it's something that I've really enjoyed. And my brother joined us a few years ago. And similarly, I think he's just really enjoying this opportunity to be able to spend this time together and do this work together. So it's just been really special.
Well, Mr. Archie, you must have did something right if both your kids want to come work with you. That's quite the compliment.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And their mother had a little something to do with that too. So
well, part of what we're doing this season is building a Pathbreakers playbook. And I think that you all might have a wealth of knowledge to share here. So we're gathering advice for change makers out there about how to make big things happen and how to sustain that work. So Alex, I want to ask you, what is a piece of advice that someone gave you along the way, doesn't have to be dad, that you live by in the work that you do now? And maybe it could be, but it's up to you. Just a piece of advice that you've received.
Yeah, well, it's definitely going to come from him, but it's not necessarily a piece of advice. It's some more just like the approach to the work. I think what I've learned from him is the persistence to just figure it out. Just this, you have to figure it out mentality. And of course, sometimes you recognize that this is not a viable path and you have to abandon ship. But when you truly believe that you have an idea that can be executed, that is something that needs to be further explored, you just have to continuously be creative and think outside the box. I know that sounds so cliche, but that's what we, particularly with the Early Ed Center project in particular, we just kept inching along. And I think that's what kept us going, is we were making progress, but it was slow progress. And we could see the end product, but we had to just figure out how to keep it in bite-sized chunks that allowed us to continue to progress.
So, Archie, I want to come to you, and we're sort of in graduation season. So somewhere out there is some 22-year-old Memphisian who's trying to figure out how she should give back to her community, how she should contribute, how she can help build the Memphis that we all need tomorrow. What advice do you have to give her? If you were a commencement speaker, what's the thing that you would tell our graduates?
Well, I would tell her or them that number one, they need to have a vision of what they want to do. And that vision needs to be far greater than themselves and what they think they can accomplish. And it needs to encompass a much larger segment of the population. And on top of that, though, they need to be realistic about what they can do, particularly if they're doing the kind of work we do. And then I echo what Alex said in terms of you got to be persistent and you got to be patient. Life's a long journey. The cliche, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. So you got to be prepared to take the long journey to get things done that you want to get done. But it all starts out with having a vision of what you want to do. You didn't ask this, but my dad, he always told us, you want to make a difference in the lives of people. And that's, my whole family has done that in various ways. So that's kind of the foundation that we operate on. You want to make a difference, whether it's real estate development or whatever, arts or whatever. You want to make and make a difference in the lives of people that you're involved with. So that's, that would be my advice. And it's not real specific, but you really got to have this, start out with a dream and a vision, but be realistic about it. And then be persistent and patient to execute on what you want to do and what you want to accomplish.
Well, thank you both so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing a little bit of the Willis legacy with us, your story, your family, your time. So we are just so honored that you all were able to come sit down and share the story with us.
Really appreciate it.
If people want to learn more about what you're doing in Memphis, where should they go?
You can go to our website. It's www.comcappartners.com. That's comcap-partners.com.
Right. And we will link that in the show notes, of course, for everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Pathbreakers is produced by the Kresge Foundation. Founded in 1924 with a mission to promote human progress, Kresge today works to expand equity and opportunity in America's cities.
Learn about our grant making and social investing work in Detroit, Memphis, New Orleans, Fresno, and cities across the U.S. at kresge.org. To hear more stories from the Pathbreakers, be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts.
Our producer, as always, is Juliet Heinley. Our managing editor is Krista Yankee. Krista gets huge help from her Kresge colleagues, Maria DiLorenzo, Kate McLaughlin, Jordan Duckins, and of course, my co-host, Tracey Pearson. Our show art is by Alejandro Herrera, logo animation by Colin Likes, and our social media mastermind is David Carrick.
Special thanks on this episode to Kresge's American Cities program, and especially Chantel Rush-Tebby and Anand Sharma, and to the Human Services program, especially Dr. Raquel Hatter. Thank you for listening, and please stay tuned for more from Memphis.